She forced me out onto the street the very next day after my son's funeral, insisting the house belonged to her now. At the reading of the will, she actually laughed, a cruel hollow sound. "Hope you enjoy being homeless, Eleanor," she sneered. But then the lawyer reached for a sealed envelope, and everything began to change. If you're watching this, don't forget to subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. And if you like stories about karma, hit that like button because this one? Something else. Let me tell you how it all began. Because sometimes the truest revenge is simply letting people show you exactly who they are. It was 3:17 in the morning on a Tuesday when the phone rang. Thomas's voice crackled through the line, tense, ragged. "Mom, something's wrong with my chest. I can't." Then silence. The call ended abruptly, leaving me in a cold panic. By the time I reached the hospital, my 45-year-old son was gone. The doctor's tone was detached, clinical. "Massive heart attack." There was nothing we could do. Vanessa stood beside me, pale and still, her face a portrait of composed shock. Yet for a fleeting second I caught something else beneath the surface. Not sorrow but relief? No. It had to be my grief playing tricks on me. "What happens now?" I whispered, still struggling to process that my healthy, vibrant son had vanished from this world. Vanessa squared her shoulders, her mask slipping just enough to reveal something steely beneath. "Now we deal with reality, Margaret. Thomas is gone, and there are decisions to make." The chill in her voice made my stomach turn. Vanessa and I had never shared much warmth, but Thomas had always stood between us, softening her edges. Now that bridge was gone, and I was beginning to see the depth of the divide that had always been there. "Of course, dear," I said softly. "We'll get through this together." I reached for her hand, but she stepped back, eyes cold. "We'll see about that." I should have heard the warning in those words. I should have known. But I told myself people grieve differently, some fall apart, others turn to stone. I convinced myself she was simply coping in her own way. The next 3 days blurred together with funeral arrangements and endless phone calls. I offered to help cover the costs. After all, Thomas had been my only child. But Vanessa waved me off with the same sharp confidence she always carried. "I'm his wife," she kept repeating. "I know what he would have wanted." So I focused on my part, writing his eulogy, notifying relatives, and holding myself together through sheer will. I'd buried my parents and my husband before, but losing a child felt like a wound that would never close. The night before the funeral, I sat alone in what used to be Thomas's childhood room, now a guest room in the house he'd shared with Vanessa. The dresser was lined with framed photographs. His graduation, their wedding, last Christmas with the family. But there wasn't a single recent picture of Thomas and me. Somewhere along the way, Vanessa had quietly erased me. A soft knock pulled me from my thoughts. Vanessa stood in the doorway, the sympathy gone from her eyes. "We need to talk, Margaret," she said coolly. The funeral itself was beautiful, I'll give her that. The flowers were elegant, the music carefully chosen, every detail polished to perfection. But beneath the surface of her performance as the grieving widow, I could feel something else, calculation. While greeting friends and family in the reception line, I overheard her whispering to her sister behind the floral arrangements. "The life insurance alone will cover the mortgage for 2 years," she said. "And without the extra expenses." "Extra expenses?" her sister asked. "What about Margaret? Where will she go?" Vanessa's laugh was short and bitter. "That's not my problem. She can figure it out like any other adult." The blood drained from my face. I'd been living there for 2 years, ever since I sold my own home to help them with their down payment. Thomas had promised it was temporary, just until I found something smaller. But temporary had turned into comfort, into belonging. I'd been part of that house, part of that life. Apparently I'd been fooling myself. "Margaret." Vanessa appeared suddenly beside me, all charm again. "Could you come to the kitchen for a moment? There are a few things we should discuss." I followed her, offering polite nods to neighbors and accepting the last few hugs from family. Once we were alone, she closed the door with quiet finality. "I'll be direct," she began, voice smooth and businesslike. "This house was in Thomas's name, which means it's mine now. I need time and space to process my grief without complications." "Complications?" I repeated carefully, my pulse rising. You living here, she replied. It's not working anymore, Margaret. I need my privacy. The words hit like a blow. Vanessa, I know you're hurting, but surely. No. She raised a hand, cutting me off. I've made up my mind. You have until tomorrow evening to pack. That should be plenty of time. I stared at her, searching for even a flicker of the young woman who once hugged me like family, who cried when Thomas proposed. That woman was gone, replaced by someone cold and hollow. Where am I supposed to go? I asked quietly. She shrugged. You're a grown woman, Margaret. You'll figure something out. The cruelty of it left me breathless. Thomas would be horrified. I whispered. Thomas is dead, she said flatly. And the sooner you accept that, the better. That night I packed my life into 4 suitcases and 2 cardboard boxes. 67 years reduced to what could fit into the trunk of my car. As I folded clothes and wrapped fragile photographs, I kept waiting for Vanessa to come upstairs to apologize, to take it all back. But she never came. At exactly 6 o'clock the following evening, she appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. Time's up, Margaret. I zipped the last suitcase shut and looked around the room that had been my haven for 2 years. The walls were bare, stripped of warmth, stripped of me. It looked like a guest room again, which I realized now it had always been. I'll need a few more minutes to carry everything out to the car, I said quietly. I'll help you, she replied. It wasn't an offer, it was a declaration. Vanessa wanted me out, and she was determined to make sure I didn't linger a second longer than necessary. We made 3 quiet, tense trips to the car. Each time the silence grew heavier. When the last box was loaded, I turned toward her, hoping to appeal to whatever shred of decency she might have left. I don't understand why you're angry with me, I said softly. If I knew what I'd done wrong, maybe I could fix it. Her expression didn't change. You didn't do anything wrong, Margaret, she replied coldly. You just exist, in my house, in my space, in my life. Thomas pitted you. I don't. The words landed with the precision of a blade. Cruel but clean. There was almost a strange relief in finally hearing the truth stripped bare of polite lies. I see, I whispered, my voice barely holding steady. I climbed into my car and rolled the window down. Will you at least tell me if there'll be a formal reading of Thomas's will? I asked. I assume he left something. Vanessa tilted her head, genuinely confused. Why would he leave you anything? You're not his wife. You never contributed financially to this household. The irony nearly made me laugh. The $40,000 I'd given them for their down payment might have disagreed, but apparently Vanessa's memory was selective or self-serving. Of course, I said quietly. Silly of me to assume. I drove away without looking back, steering toward the Hampton Inn on Route 9. The only nearby place I could afford while I figured out what to do next. In my rearview mirror, Vanessa stood in the driveway until my car disappeared around the corner. The hotel room smelled of bleach and stale air. I set my suitcases down and sat on the stiff polyester bedspread, staring at my reflection in the mirror above the dresser. The woman looking back seemed unfamiliar, hollow-eyed, weary. A widow, a mother without a child, a woman without a home. But as I sat there, something unexpected began to flicker beneath the grief. Not despair, though there was plenty of that. Something sharper. Something that felt like anticipation. Vanessa thought she'd won. She believed she had successfully erased me from her life and taken everything that mattered. What she didn't realize was that Thomas had always been more thoughtful, more deliberate than she ever gave him credit for. 2 weeks passed. My savings dwindled and uncertainty loomed. Then, just as I was starting to panic, my phone rang. Mrs. Ellison? This is Robert Caldwell from Caldwell and Associates. I handled your son's legal affairs. Yes, of course, I said, sitting up straighter. I remember you from the house closing. I'm calling to inform you that the probate process is complete, he said. There will be a formal reading of Thomas's will next Tuesday at 2 o'clock in my office. Your presence is required. Required? I repeated, startled. There must be a mistake. Vanessa seemed to think. Mrs. Ellison, he interrupted gently. Thomas's will specifically names you as a beneficiary. I'll see you next Tuesday at 2. When he hung up, I stared at the phone, the words echoing in my mind. A beneficiary. Thomas had left me something. Perhaps a keepsake. A watch, a photo album, something sentimental. Vanessa wouldn't like it, but whatever Thomas had decided, it was final. That weekend, I spent hours scrolling through listings for small apartments in senior living communities. My savings could stretch one more week at the hotel, plus first month's rent and a deposit if I was careful. My pension and Social Security would need to do the rest. On Tuesday, I arrived at Caldwell & Associates 15 minutes early, nerves fluttering in my stomach. At exactly 1:45, Vanessa's silver BMW pulled in. She stepped out in a sleek black dress and sunglasses that probably cost more than my entire outfit. A tall man in an expensive suit followed. Her brother, Ethan, perpetually glued to his phone. When I entered the reception area, Vanessa's polite mask cracked. "What is she doing here?" she demanded. The young receptionist didn't flinch. "Mrs. Ellison is here for the will reading." Vanessa's lips thinned. "Which Mrs. Ellison?" "Both of you, apparently," the receptionist replied with practiced professionalism. Ethan leaned close and whispered something to his sister. She nodded curtly, her posture stiff. Whatever small trace of civility had existed between us had officially evaporated. At precisely 2 o'clock, Mr. Caldwell appeared. A kind-faced man in his 60s with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses, he had the calm demeanor of someone who still believed in fairness and order. "Ladies, gentlemen," he said, ushering us into his office. "I know this is a difficult moment." Thomas was very clear about his intentions. "I'll read the will in full, and afterward we can address any questions." Vanessa leaned forward, eager. Ethan poised his pen over a notepad. I folded my hands in my lap, bracing myself. The first items were as expected. The house, the cars, the retirement funds, the insurance policy, all going to Vanessa. With each sentence she nodded smugly, occasionally glancing at me with a faint, self-satisfied smile. Then Mr. Caldwell's tone changed. He paused, adjusted his glasses, and cleared his throat. "There is, however, one final provision," he said. "Thomas added it just 3 months ago." The air seemed to thicken. Vanessa froze, her posture rigid. Ethan set his pen down. My pulse quickened. Mr. Caldwell looked down at the page and began to read. "To my mother, Margaret Ellison, Mr. Caldwell read aloud, his voice steady, "who provided the down payment for our home and never once asked to be repaid. I leave the contents of safety deposit boxes E3 through D7 at First National Bank, along with all associated documentation and account information contained therein." The words seemed to hang in the air. "What safety deposit box?" Vanessa snapped, her voice slicing through the room. "Thomas never mentioned anything about that." Mr. Caldwell looked up from the papers calmly. Apparently, it was something he maintained privately. He was quite clear that the contents are to go to his mother. I blinked, stunned. Thomas had never told me about a safety deposit box either. My mind spun with questions. What could he have possibly left there for me? Ethan leaned forward, his tone clipped and professional. "What's in it?" "I have no idea," Mr. Caldwell admitted. Thomas provided only the bank information and stated that Mrs. Ellison was to have full access upon his passing. Vanessa's face turned crimson. "That's absurd. If there's anything of value in that box, it's part of the estate. We'll contest this." "You're free to do so," Mr. Caldwell replied mildly. "But the clause is very specific, and Thomas was of sound mind when he made the amendment. I personally witnessed the signing." "When did he add this?" I asked quietly. Mr. Caldwell checked his notes. 3 months ago. February 15th to be exact. He came in solely to make this change. My breath caught. I remembered that date. It was the day after Valentine's Day, the night Thomas had been unusually quiet during dinner. Vanessa had complained about the neighbor's barking dog, and he'd barely said a word. "This is ridiculous," Vanessa hissed, standing abruptly. "Come on, Ethan. We're leaving. We'll file a challenge tomorrow." "Actually," Mr. Caldwell interjected, producing another envelope, "before you go, there's more." Thomas left specific instructions for his mother regarding the contents of the safety deposit box. He handed me the envelope, sealed, heavy, formal. "These are the bank authorization papers and Thomas's personal key. You'll need to present them to the bank, along with his death certificate. The process usually takes about 3 business days." Vanessa's gaze locked on the envelope, eyes narrowing like a predator's. "I'm coming with you," she said flatly. "I'm afraid that won't be possible," Mr. Caldwell said firmly. "Bank policy restricts access to the person named in the will. That would be Mrs. Ellison." "This is insane," Vanessa snapped. "How do we even know there's anything valuable in there? It could just be junk sentimental clutter." I rose, clutching the envelope to my chest. "Then I suppose we'll find out soon enough." As we exited the office, I could feel her glare burning into my back. In the parking lot, she caught up with me before I could unlock my car. "Margaret, let's be reasonable," she said in a tone that barely disguised her desperation. "Whatever's in that box, we can share it. Thomas would have wanted me to have a portion." For the first time since my son's death, I actually smiled. "You made it clear you don't believe Thomas would have left me anything. Now suddenly you're interested in sharing?" "I'm just saying." "You're saying whatever you think might get you access," I interrupted calmly. I opened my car door, still holding the envelope. "Thomas was very specific. The contents are mine." Her face hardened, the mask falling completely. "Don't forget, Margaret," she hissed. "You're homeless. You need my goodwill more than I need yours." I paused with my hand on the car door, meeting her glare evenly. "Actually, Vanessa," I said, "I don't think I need anything from you at all." 3 business days later, after signing the paperwork and submitting the death certificate, I finally stood before safety deposit box number 3537 at First National Bank. Mrs. Grant, the bank manager, greeted me warmly. "Your son rented this unit about 5 years ago," she explained as she led me through the reinforced doors into the vault. "He visited quite regularly." 5 years. My heart tightened. Thomas had been planning something that long? Mrs. Grant used her master key, and I inserted Thomas's. The heavy box slid out with a soft metallic scrape. It was large, about the size of a briefcase, and heavier than I expected. "Take all the time you need," Mrs. Grant said kindly, ushering me into a small private viewing room. "I'll be right outside when you're finished." Alone in the quiet space, I set the box on the table and opened it slowly. On top rested a single envelope, my name written in Thomas's familiar handwriting. My hands trembled as I unfolded the letter. "Mom," it began. "If you're reading this, then I'm gone. And Vanessa has probably already shown you who she really is. I'm sorry for that, though I can't say I'm surprised. I've known for years what kind of person I married, and I've been preparing for this." Tears blurred the words as I continued reading. "You gave us $40,000 for the down payment on our home. You always treated it like a loan, even though you never asked to be repaid. I've been investing that money for the past 5 years, adding to it when I could. The accounts in this box are not just repayment. They're what your gift has grown into." My hand shook as I set the letter aside and looked at the documents beneath it. Bank statements, investment portfolios, account details. My eyes widened. $185,000. All in my name. All legally transferred. I picked up the letter again, reading the next lines through a blur of tears. "Vanessa's been telling people you contribute nothing. What she doesn't mention is that I've paid the mortgage from my salary since the day we moved in. Every dollar you gave went into investments for your future. I documented everything: emails, texts, her comments about you. It's all in the folder labeled documentation. You deserve to know the truth about who she is." My vision wavered as I reached for the folder, the one that would show me just how deeply my son had seen through the woman who had tried to destroy me. Inside the box was a thick folder, neatly organized, labeled, and devastating. Printed emails, screenshots of text messages, photographs of credit card statements. Years of manipulation and deceit laid bare in black and white. The last lines of Thomas's letter blurred as I read them through tears. "You deserve better than the way she's treated you. Take this money, Mom, and build a life where no one can ever make you feel unwanted again. And please don't tell Vanessa about any of this until you're safely away from her. Trust me on that. All my love, Thomas." I sat there for nearly an hour, reading, rereading, trying to process the truth my son had quietly safeguarded. When I finally emerged from that cold little viewing room, my tears had dried, replaced by something sharper: resolve. Mrs. Grant helped me pack the papers into a large envelope and walked me through the process for transferring the investments into my own accounts. As I stepped out into the sunlight, my phone rang. "Margaret," came Vanessa's syrupy voice. "I was wondering if you'd like to come by for lunch today. We could discuss what you found in the safety deposit box." I caught my reflection in the car window and smiled faintly. "That's very generous, Vanessa. I'll be there at noon." It was time to let her learn that underestimating someone can be the biggest mistake of all. At exactly 12 o'clock, I pulled up to what was now her house, carrying a small gift bag and wearing a calm, unreadable expression. Vanessa answered the door in a flowing white dress that probably cost more than my entire weekly hotel stay. "Margaret, I'm so glad you came," she said brightly. "I made your favorite chicken salad." How thoughtful. The same woman who'd thrown me out the day after my son's funeral suddenly remembered my favorite meal. The dining table gleamed with fine china and fresh flowers. She poured iced tea, speaking lightly about the weather and the neighbors while I waited for her to circle the real topic. Finally, she eased into her chair with a practiced smile. "I've been thinking about yesterday. About the safety deposit box." "Have you?" I replied, taking a slow sip of tea. "I know we've had our differences," she continued, feigning sincerity, "but Thomas would want us to be there for each other. Family should stick together." Family. The word almost made me laugh. From the woman who'd tossed me out like an unwanted tenant. "I couldn't agree more," I said evenly. Her eyes brightened, mistaking composure for concession. "I'm so relieved to hear that. I was worried you might be upset about finding your own place so soon, but I needed space to grieve, you understand." "Of course," I said mildly, taking a bite of chicken salad. "Grief affects everyone differently." "Exactly," she said quickly, leaning forward. "So, about what Thomas left you, I was thinking maybe we could pool our resources. Combine whatever was in the box with Thomas's life insurance. Invest it together. I have excellent advisors." I smiled slightly. "I'll bet you do." Then, tilting my head, I asked, "What makes you think there was anything valuable in the box?" Her hand froze mid-gesture. "Well, Thomas was private about finances. There must have been a reason he kept something separate." "Private," I repeated softly. "That's an interesting choice of words." "You know what I mean," she said quickly, waving her hand. "Men and their secret financial planning. They never tell us everything." I set my fork down and met her gaze directly. "Actually, I think Thomas told you exactly as much as he thought you needed to know." Something flickered in her expression. Uncertainty, maybe fear. "What did you find in the box, Margaret?" I smiled, letting the silence stretch. "Oh, before we talk about that, I brought you something." I reached into the gift bag and pulled out a small wrapped package. She unwrapped it eagerly to reveal a framed photograph of Thomas in his college graduation gown. Her features softened. "Oh, Margaret, this is lovely. Thank you." "I thought you should have it," I said sweetly. "After all, you were such a devoted wife." Her eyes darted up, wary. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing at all," I replied calmly. "Just appreciating how well you took care of my son." Her smile faltered. "Margaret, you're being cryptic. Just tell me what was in the box." "Documents," I said simply, taking another sip of tea. "Very interesting reading material." "What kind of documents?" "Oh, financial statements, investment records, some correspondence." I paused, letting the tension hang. Quite a few printed emails and text messages. The color drained from her face. "Text messages?" I nodded. "Thomas was thorough, especially near the end. Would you like to see one?" I unlocked my phone and turned the screen toward her. "This is from about 6 months ago," I said evenly. Her own words glared back at her in bold black text. "God, I can't wait until that old bat finally moves out. Then we can turn her room into the home gym I've been wanting." Vanessa lunged for my phone, but I pulled it back easily. "There are dozens more," I said calmly. "Thomas was meticulous about documentation." "Stop," she whispered, her composure unraveling. "Oh, we're just getting started," I said, scrolling again. "Here's another. Your chat with Ethan about convincing Thomas the First should pay my share, when he was already covering the mortgage. And this one, where you joke with your sister about how easy it is to make me feel like a burden." Vanessa went pale, gripping the edge of the table. I set the phone down gently and regarded her with quiet finality. That was rather forward-thinking of you, planning my eviction while Thomas was still alive. Her mask cracked completely then, and the woman who had once played the grieving widow now looked exactly as my son had warned me she would. He had no right to save private messages, Vanessa hissed, her face twisted with outrage. Actually, I said calmly, leaning back in my chair, he had every right. It was his house and you were talking about his mother. I studied her for a long moment before adding, the real question is, what are we going to do about this situation? Her eyes narrowed. What do you want? The mask was gone now. What remained was the cold, calculating woman Thomas had once tried to protect me from. Want? I echoed softly. I don't want anything from you, Vanessa. I never did. Then why? She demanded. Why are you doing this? What's the point of humiliating me? I tilted my head thoughtfully. You know you're right. There's no point in humiliating you. You've done that perfectly well yourself. I don't understand, she muttered. You threw me out of my home the day after my son's funeral, I said, rising slowly from my chair. You told me I was worthless, that Thomas pitied me, that I'd contributed nothing to your household. But what you never understood was that Thomas saw everything. Every cruel word, every manipulation, every lie. Vanessa gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white. And do you want to know the beautiful part? I went on, voice calm but sharp as glass. He didn't document it to destroy you. He did it to protect me. Because he knew the moment he was gone, you'd show everyone exactly who you are. You can't prove any of this would hold up in court, she snapped. Court? I let out a low laugh, surprised even by the sound of it. Oh, sweetheart, I have no intention of going to court. Her eyes flickered with confusion. You're not. Why would I? I smiled. You've already given me everything I need. I don't understand what you're talking about. I reached into my bag and pulled out the thick folder Thomas had left for me, the one from the safety deposit box, and placed it squarely on the table. Thomas left me more than screenshots, Vanessa. He left 5 years of proof of everything. She stared at the folder like it might catch fire. There are bank statements here showing the mortgage payments coming directly from Thomas's salary account for the entire time I lived under this roof, I said. Emails between you and Ethan discussing how to handle the Margaret situation. Credit card records showing luxury purchases made on the very days you told Thomas you couldn't afford groceries. Her breathing quickened. Thomas saved all of that? Oh yes, I said quietly. Every text, every email. Even the ones where you called him a pushover and bragged to your friends about manipulating him into believing I was a burden. She flinched as if I'd struck her. And do you know what I found most fascinating? I continued, opening the folder to a specific page. This email chain between you and Ethan. About your plan to have me declared legally incompetent so you could access my pension and Social Security. That's not true. We never. No, you never followed through. I interrupted, my tone even. Because Thomas figured out what you were plotting, and he took steps to make sure you couldn't touch a dime. Her eyes widened. What steps? You don't have anything worth protecting. I smiled. Funny you should say that. Because according to these investment statements, Thomas spent 5 years quietly growing the money I gave you for that down payment. It's now worth quite a bit. So yes, I have plenty worth protecting. That's impossible, she whispered. You're living in a hotel. I'm staying in a hotel, I corrected. By choice. While I decide my next move. The silence that followed was almost tangible. I could see her mind racing, trying to calculate, trying to regain control. How much? She finally asked. Excuse me. How much money did Thomas leave you? I closed the folder and met her gaze evenly. That's none of your business, is it? I'm his wife, she said hotly. I have a right to know. You had a right to what your husband left you, I replied. The house, the cars, the life insurance, his retirement accounts. From where I'm standing, you did quite well. Her chair scraped violently against the floor as she shot to her feet. You manipulative old witch. You're trying to steal what's mine. Steal? I raised an eyebrow. Everything I have was freely given to me by my son, legally, intentionally, and with love. He had every right to do what he wished with his assets. He was my husband. Yes, I said softly. And apparently, he knew exactly what kind of wife you were. The word struck deep. Vanessa's face flushed with anger and panic. I want to see those bank statements, she demanded. I'm sure you do, I said, sliding the folder into my bag. I'm warning you, Margaret, she said, voice trembling with fury. I laughed. Freely, almost joyfully. Vanessa dear, you already threw me out. You humiliated me at my own son's funeral. You made it clear that in your eyes I'm worthless. What exactly do you think you can threaten me with now? She stared at me for a long, tense moment, and I could almost see the wheels turning as she changed tactics. Her expression softened, her voice trembling just slightly. Margaret, please, let's be reasonable, she said, trying for remorse. I know I've been difficult since Thomas died. I was grieving, not thinking straight. But we're family, we should work together. Family, I repeated quietly. Yes, you've said that before. Right after telling me Thomas pitted me and that I'd never contributed anything. I didn't mean that. I was upset, she said quickly. I said things I didn't mean. Oh, but you did mean them, I said softly. That's what makes Thomas's documentation so powerful. You didn't just say it once. You said it again and again to different people over the course of years. Her mask cracked further. What do you want from me, Margaret? An apology? Fine. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I hurt your feelings. I'm sorry I asked you to leave. I'm sorry for everything. Can we move on and talk about the money like adults? There's nothing to discuss. Of course there is, she insisted. If Thomas left you a significant amount, we need to manage it responsibly. I know wonderful financial advisors. You mean, I interrupted lightly, you could help me spend it responsibly? Her mouth tightened. That's not what I said. No, I agreed, standing and gathering my things. But it's exactly what you meant. It's what you meant, I said, slipping my purse strap over my shoulder. And Vanessa, let me make something perfectly clear. The money Thomas left me isn't some lucky inheritance that just fell into my lap. It's the return on the $40,000 I gave you for the house down payment, plus 5 years of careful investment. Her mouth fell open. 40,000? That was, Thomas said it was a family contribution. I shook my head. Thomas was trying to preserve your pride and mine, but he never forgot that it was a loan. I trusted him with that money because he promised to repay it. And he did, just not in the way you expected. I could practically see the gears turning in her mind, her expression tightening as she began to do the math. If you invested $40,000 5 years ago, and Thomas kept growing it, her voice dropped to a whisper. How much is it worth now? I pulled out my phone and opened the banking app the investment manager had set up for me. The balance gleamed on the screen as I turned it toward her. $185,000. The color drained from her face. She reached for the table to steady herself. That's impossible. Thomas was a cautious investor, I said evenly, and very determined to make sure his mother would never be left without security. But that's almost as much as the life insurance policy, she stammered. Yes, I said. It is. That money should be part of the estate, she snapped. It should be split between us. Should it? I asked calmly. And based on what legal principle exactly? I'm his wife, she shot back, her tone shrill now. You're just his mother. The word struck like a physical blow. Just his mother. But instead of pain, something else welled up inside me, clarity. You know what, Vanessa? I said softly. You're right. I am just his mother. The woman who gave birth to him, raised him, supported him through college, and lent him the money for the house where you later threw me out like yesterday's trash. And apparently, that was enough for Thomas to make sure I'd never have to rely on anyone's charity again. I turned toward the door. Wait! She called after me, desperation creeping into her voice. Margaret, please, let's talk about this. We can work it out. Sit down. Be reasonable. I paused, one hand on the doorframe. Work out what exactly? The money. Our relationship. Everything. She said quickly, panic edging her words. I know I made mistakes. I was grieving, I was under pressure, I wasn't thinking straight. But we can fix this. I'm sure you were worried about finances. I said, voice quiet but sharp. Though not for the reasons you're pretending. Her eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? I reached into my bag and pulled out another document. One I'd saved for last. It means Thomas also documented your spending, Vanessa, including the $15,000 you charged to credit cards in the month before he died. Her face went ashen. Spa treatments, designer dresses, a weekend trip to New York with your sister. All while telling Thomas you were worried about grocery money. I wasn't. You weren't planning to live off his life insurance, I said quietly, while tossing out the inconvenient mother-in-law who might get in the way of your lifestyle? Her shoulders sagged, the fight draining from her body. You don't understand the pressure I was under, she whispered. What pressure? I asked, though my voice held no real curiosity. Everyone expected me to be perfect, the perfect wife, the perfect hostess. Thomas's colleagues, our neighbors, my family. Do you have any idea how exhausting it is to maintain that image? I studied her. This woman surrounded by wealth, crying over the weight of her own vanity. No, Vanessa, I said evenly. I don't. I was too busy actually taking care of your husband while you were busy spending his money. Her voice cracked. I loved Thomas. You loved what Thomas could provide for you, I replied. There's a difference. Her tears smeared her flawless makeup. I can't lose everything, she whispered. I can't go back to being nobody. You're not nobody, Vanessa, I said. You're Thomas's widow. You have a $500,000 house, a $200,000 life insurance policy, and his retirement accounts. If you're smart, you'll live comfortably for the rest of your life. She looked up at me, her eyes wide and hollow. But it's not enough for the life I planned. Then maybe, I said softly, you planned the wrong life. I turned and started toward the door again. This time she didn't follow. The only sound behind me was a faint thud. I looked back to see her slumped in her chair, face gray, eyes unfocused. For a moment I thought she might be having a heart attack. But then I recognized what I was seeing, not illness. Defeat. The kind that comes when someone realizes they've lost everything they were never entitled to in the first place. I can't, she whispered weakly. I can't lose everything. You're not losing everything, Vanessa, I said gently. You're losing the things that never belonged to you. I left her sitting there in her pristine dining room, surrounded by her wedding china and the wreckage of her carefully curated life, and stepped out into the sunlight. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's justice, delivered quietly, precisely when it's needed most. And if you're lucky, it comes with a generous bank balance, and the peace of knowing your child became the person you always hoped they'd be. Thomas had taken care of me after all, just like he promised he always would. Even from beyond the grave, my son had kept his word. And that, more than any amount of money, was the greatest gift he could have given me. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.